If you find yourself struggling to build a better relationship with your kids, you're not alone. We're here to help. My name is Shahzad. I'm one of the co-founders here at Axiom Learning, and we've got a webinar coming up that we invite you to register for. We're going to talk about the 3 keys to building strong relationships with your kids and the 6 keys to building resilience. It turns out the relationship that parents have with their kids is linked to their ability to exhibit resilience. Their attribute of resilience comes and is based upon the relationship that they have with their parents. And so even if your kids seem like they don't want to build that relationship with you, it's actually really important for them to do. So a few of the things that we're going to talk about just to kind of get you started, we're going to talk about the 3 keys are built on targeted praise. So what is not targeted praise is to say something like good job, because it's too vague and you get to decide when to say good job. It's not something they get to decide. So what it does is it takes away the locus of control, which is the second thing, giving them the locus of control. And then to sequence how you're building that relationship with your kids is actually really important. If you get the sequence wrong, you try to push ahead too quickly, or you get the order of the steps wrong, then you're going to find yourself, kind of breaking that relationship again, or at least fraying that sense of trust. And so the magic wand that we're going to share with you, and it really is the closest thing to a magic wand, is something called virtues-based parenting. And that kind of ties together all 3 of these characteristics for parents in building trust. In terms of building resilience, there are what we call 6 keystone habits. Gratitude is probably the most important, or certainly the foundation one. The importance of small wins. We want our kids to achieve big things, but big things are essentially made up of a series of small steps. And so figuring out how to share that and share that kind of process with your kids, and mastery of that process with your kids is something we'll talk about. Exercise, it turns out, is really important in building resilience, and team sports is a subset of that we'll talk about in the webinar. We'll talk about journaling, how to do it and why it's important. And it turns out there's a lot of research to support the idea that meditation or prayer, depending on your cultural and religious backgrounds, are really important and really helpful to help our kids build resilience. And something that's kind of maybe feels a little bit out of place, but actually turns out is really important is people that wake up early have a disproportionately large amount of resilience, but are also disproportionately successful. They tend to be wealthier over the course of their lives, healthier and happier. And so we'll talk a little bit about why waking up early is so important, but more importantly than that, we're going to talk about how to kind of set your lifestyle up so that waking up early is not so difficult. It turns out waking up early is not about having the discipline to get up early. It's about having the discipline to set your environment up so you can go to bed earlier. And so therefore waking up earlier becomes a lot easier to do. It's actually really important to get enough sleep. But when we talk about gratitude, which is what we think of as the foundational or the first keystone habit, the first thing that as a parent you need to know is that gratitude is something that you have to model for your kids. If you're saying to your kids that you need to be grateful, but you find yourself kind of articulating a lot of complaints or a lot of frustration, your kids see that, right? And there's a lot of research to show that our behaviors tend to pass down from one generation to the next. And so, whatever habits you want your kids to have, including gratitude, the closer you can be to exhibiting whatever you want your kids to be able to do, the more likely they are to actually be able to do it. One of the reasons that gratitude is so important, though, is that it shifts the focus away from what's wrong to what's right. And what that does implicitly is it breaks the cycle of defeatism that makes it so hard for us to kind of get things done. And when because you feel like, oh, it's not going to work anyway, that's really hard for resilience. Versus you feel like if I just, there's a lot of good things going on, or if I can just press on just a little bit longer, maybe this will work also. Gratitude is the first step to that. And what happens is that when you break the cycle of defeatism, your sense of self-worth rises, your belief in yourself rises, right? And that belief in your self-worth, it turns out, is the driver to the breaking of the cycle of defeatism and my ability to want to continue to kind of push on. So even when things are difficult, right? There's a lot of really fascinating and in some ways scary research to show that when kids have a low sense of self-esteem, it's almost as though they don't feel like they deserve to be successful. And that's one of the reasons that kids would struggle to maintain their resilience, right? Ultimately, the reason we think gratitude is so important is gratitude increases our kids' sense of trust in the world, which ultimately turns into their not just resilience, but ultimately the willingness to learn and try new things, right? What you don't want your kids to do is to have just a few skills and stay within a small little box their whole lives because they're afraid of trying new things, because they're afraid of failing. What you do want, I think, is that you want your kids to be comfortable with the idea that to do new things is a process, and it starts with not being good at something, kind of learning the ropes and failing along the way. But the more you do, the less you fail, the more successful you get, right? And gratitude is the foundation for that whole process. So we invite you again to register for the webinar. It starts at 11 a.m. on the West Coast, 2 p.m. on the East Coast. If you live somewhere in the middle of the country, do the math. If you live outside the country, definitely do the math. We're really excited about this webinar. It's going to be about 90 minutes of chock-a-block content about how to strengthen and build relationships with your kids, and why that's going to be important to help them kind of maintain and enhance their resilience. So until then, again, I do hope you register. Until then, stay safe and be well. Then hopefully we'll see all of you on the webinar.